Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Andrew Hyde, I'm from Cambridge University Press, and we're delighted to host this webinar today on anticipating migration methods, data and policy in forecasting and foresight. And this marks a special collection of articles that have been published in the journal Data and Policy, published by Cambridge University Press in association with the Data for Policy community. And the QR code that you can see on the screen will take you to the collection of articles. We're delighted to have the following speakers here who are all editors of the collection. Matteo Fontana from Royal Holloway University of London, Anna Rosińska of the Knowledge Centre on Migration and Demography Unit at the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, Stefaan Verhulst of New York University, the GovLab and the Data Tank, and Damien Jusselme of the International Organization for Migration. Before we start, I wanted to note some housekeeping items. Firstly, that the webinar is being recorded and we'll make it available on YouTube later via the Cambridge University Press and Data for Policy channels. We encourage people to participate in the webinar with considered and respectful questions. You can use the Q&A to put questions to the editors and make comments. But given the political sensitivities surrounding migration, we're going to be approving questions before making them visible to everyone. And lastly, I just wanted to note that all speakers are here to express their own views rather than those of their institutions. If I can just call for the next slides, we've got a couple of, back a couple of slides. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight here the authors who have contributed to this collection of papers, many of whom I think are in the audience. And moving to the next slide, the reviewers whose participation in this whole process was also absolutely essential. So with that introduction over, I would like to pass to Matteo and Anna, who are our next speakers.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for the very kind introduction. It's a pleasure for me to be here. As Andrew said, my name is Matteo Fontana. I am a lecturer at Royal Holloway University of London. I will be probably the most academic, the most academic person of the panel. In any case, my role is to introduce to you why we have decided that we have this special collection on anticipatory methods in migration policy. Why do we think it's relevant to have such a paper collection on this journal? And I will guide you very quickly through the content that is then going to be, let's say, highlighted more by my panelist colleagues. So next slide, please. The landscape that migration policy is facing right now, both from let's say a real policy perspective, so policymakers making decisions, as well as academics studying in this area, is let's say an increasingly complex one. So we are facing crises that are multidimensional. So we have migration flows are no longer driven by single elements or single variables. We have the interconnection between conflicts, climate change that is starting to be more and more important, more and more impactful, especially in let's say in regions where that are sources for migrants, as well as increasing level of political and economic instability. At the same time, there is a strong push from the demand side of policy for methods that are anticipatory. So for something that is not reactive, or is not only reactive to migration crisis, but starts to be able to plan ahead and to be prepared for possible problems, or possible problems is probably the word, is probably not the nicest word out there, but possible situations on the migration area. Next slide, please. Why should we be anticipatory, and why policy making should be anticipatory? essentially for what I said a second ago. So you want to be prepared. You want to, for instance, be able to facilitate humanitarian aid. You want to be able to allocate your resources in a better way, in a more efficient way. And at the same time, you want to do it in a scientifically based and a scientifically driven way, in order to, let's say, build a common understanding of what is going on and build a shared understanding of what are the right decisions to be taken, and how a government or how an international organization should behave. Next slide, please. Perfect. So our idea, or having set the scene in this way, our idea with the special issue, our idea with the special collection, was to try to build a snapshot of what is the present situation, both in the academic world, but as well as policy. You will see many translational research articles and many, let's say, apply test cases of the implementation of anticipatory methodologies in policy and in the real world. So we're bringing together, on the one side, the advances given by machine learning, by data science, by AI, and on the other side of the spectrum, more, let's say, more qualitative and more human. Let me use this weird term, or let me use this term, more or less quantitative methodologies. In fact, and I will say this in the conclusions of this webinar, plurality in methodologies, plurality in methodologies is a key feature. Next slide, please. What do we mean? We're talking about anticipatory methodologies. We're talking about anticipatory approaches. What do we mean with that? I will be a bit more specific, more at a later stage during the webinar. But we're talking about classical forecasting and nowcasting techniques, either implemented with classical econometrics. We have some papers, I remember Bijak and co-authors, with, let's say, more traditional econometrics, as well as more cutting-edge machine learning-based approaches. But we're also talking about horizon scanning, expert elicitation, foresight exercises with a participatory framework, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So to build up a taxonomy, or to introduce then what is probably one of the big take-home messages, or one of the big additions to the literature stemming from this special collection. The methodology, or our methodologies, can be grouped in advanced quantitative forecasting methodologies, which may or may not include novel and big data sources, that should be accompanied by participatory methodologies and qualitative forecasting. And we have, and if you go, and I strongly invite you to go and check the special collection. There is an article by our very own Stefaan Verhulst that builds a bit of a taxonomy, or an overarching taxonomy for anticipatory methodologies. Let's say, for an additional introduction, for a deeper explanation of the context, I will leave the floor to my colleague Anna.
Thank you, Matteo. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you, finally. I wanted to emphasize that this special issue is one of the outcomes of a longer-term initiative, and which is called Big Data for Migration Alliance, BD4M in short. I will share the link in the chat so you can check it out. This alliance has been established in 2018 by IOM's Global Migration Data Analysis Center, the European Commission Knowledge Center on Migration Demography, and GovLab. We are all here today. For me, it's a very nice moment because the Big Data for Migration Alliance was one of the first initiatives that I was involved in as soon as I joined the Joint Research Center around 3 years ago. So it's super nice to see this coming to such a nice end. And I wanted to say that one of the aims of the Big Data of Migration Alliance is to explore the potential of new data sources and the combination of traditional innovative methodologies for the analysis of migration, always keeping in mind its relevance for policy making. Another very important point for us is the ethical use of data. And all these issues you will see reflected very strongly, I would say, in the special collection that we are presenting to you today. On the side of the European Commission Joint Research Center, I wanted to emphasize that for us, it's really instrumental to stay involved in the state-of-the-art anticipation discussions, because to have anticipatory action, to be prepared, we have to have the ability to as accurately as possible, forecast what will happen in the future, and also to be accurately aware of the present, including some emerging signals. I will talk a little bit more about the work that the JRC is doing on these topics later on. Today, we have for you a short session, but a dynamic one with some good 15-20 minutes, hopefully, that will be dedicated for the Q&As. And first, there will be Stefaan Verhulst, who will present the taxonomy that Matteo already mentioned. It's a great guide to navigate. If you're like new to the anticipatory methods, like search no more for a guide that will help you navigate what's happening in this blooming field. Next, we will have more insights from Matteo on new data sources and methodological innovations. These contributions will be like 6-7 minutes tops. So you will get just the best of it, the gist. And following, Damien and Jusselme will present Foresight approaches and scenario methodologies. Then I will speak about the European Commission's and in particular Joint Research Center experience and the perspective on anticipation with concrete examples. And next, we have a very exciting moment, because we will invite a couple of authors who are here today with us to deliver lightning contribution. By the way, if among you there are any more authors that would like also to deliver a presentation or just do a shout out of their work, please contact us through the Q&A and we will try to make it possible. And finally, we will have a moment for moderated Q&As. I am giving it away to Stefaan, and I hope you enjoy today's webinar.
Great. Thanks so much, Matteo and Anna, for this introduction and setting the stage of this special collection. And thanks everyone for joining as well. And it's my great delight to introduce one of the papers that were part of the special collection, but was also one of the impetus behind the special collection, which was a paper that I've done together with Sarah Marcucci and Maria Cervantes on what is actually out there in terms of methodologies and how do we start thinking about innovation in anticipation using a taxonomy that would enable people in the field to understand what might be fit for purpose. Because one of the key challenges in the space of anticipation, and especially methodologies, is that there is a lot of methodologies. And the question was then, of course, which ones are more innovative, which ones are to a large extent pushing the boundaries of existing practice, given, as Matteo already was saying, given the fact that we have new methods, including machine learning, but also new data sources that can be brought to the table as well. And then the question was, of course, how do we then create order in this kind of massive space of methodologies? And so what we've did was basically try to come up with an overview of what's around in the current environment, what can we understand with regard to new methodologies, but also what are some of the new data sources? Because it's also very interesting to see that now non-traditional data becomes far more important and far more relevant for anticipation, such as social media posts, digital trace data, and so on. And so what we've done was basically develop an overview of all the methods and then put that into a repository of examples. And I can share in the chat also a link to kind of the repository that will give you a better flavor of all the examples that we identify, because this was not meant to just be conceptual, but also really look into what is actually living in the space and what can we learn in terms of lessons learned. And what we tried to do was to basically categorize all the methodologies with regard to policy objectives. And as Matteo was saying, there are multiple reasons why one would want to anticipate. One is, of course, policy, but it could also be to have better resource allocation and to also have a better understanding of what might, of course, be needed in terms of responding to possible migration flows, but also try to categorize them in terms of what's the time frame of anticipation. Because when we talk about anticipation, we also need to start talking about anticipation in what sense of a time frame. Is it in 6 months? Is it in 5 years? Is it in 50 years? Because for different time frames, you have different methodologies and different kinds of data to a large extent that is needed. And so what we tried to do there was to basically, anyway, give an overview of all kinds of methods that exist. And big lesson learned is that there is no shortage of messages, of methods, and that we really need to start understanding what is fit for purpose in order to really guide the field to a large extent. And so what we tried to do was to look at it and also, anyway, think in terms of, does the existing taxonomy still make sense in the current environment? Because as we already heard, and it still, of course, is used on a regular basis, the existing methodology basically divides the anticipatory methodological field in two ways. On the one hand, you're either a forecast, which is all about more kind of quantitative, data-rich environments for anticipation, or it's more of a foresight approach, where it's more kind of qualitative, quite often scenario-based, or to a large extent also based upon some kind of exploration, imagination on what the future might look like. And so this is kind of the typical taxonomy that exists. But what we see and what we also think is needed more in the future, given the complexity that Matteo was expressing at the beginning, what we see is that actually the typical division between forecast and foresight not always holds true anymore, and that we need a new way of actually thinking about anticipation, where forecast and foresight might become more blended with each other, and where new methodologies can also start becoming both quantitative and qualitative at the same time. And so what we tried to do was to basically come up with a new kind of taxonomy that provides a better sense of what are the current methodologies and where is innovation happening. And this is kind of the taxonomy that we proposed to the field, which is, of course, a proposal and also one that we keep on fine-tuning as well. And in the paper, we give more rationale why we decided to actually identify 3 areas and the taxonomy according to 3 elements. One is experience, expertise, and exploration. And so this is kind of the way we start dividing the methodology, where the first group of methodologies are based upon capturing experiences. And this is really where we see that the existing quantitative methods, which were mainly about averages or mainly about kind of other data sources that doesn't capture the lived experience from migrants and refugees, where we see that that is where an area where we see a lot of innovation, where we actually capture lived experience and then also take that into account for anticipation to a large extent, and that we also see new ways of doing so, leveraging non-traditional data as well. We have many examples. I'm not gonna, and Anna told me I only have 7 minutes, so I'm not gonna go too far into detail. But one example is, for instance, the EMT example, where they tried to capture the needs and the experiences from migrants as well. Second category is more of the expertise-based ones, where you actually tap into the expertise residing in the migration space. And again, Delphi methods and new kinds of AI-enabled Delphi methods. And actually, there is a lot of agentic AI that is being used now in that space as well, in order to really have more of an expertise kind of anticipation. Another example here is like the FuseNet example that tries to do this by really tapping into kind of expertise within the humanitarian sector. And then the third category is the more exploration category, which is kind of scenario plus foresight plus forecast, and again, in traditional and non-traditional way. And there are many examples here, including examples where kind of online gaming is being used as a method for anticipation as well. So this was basically our effort, is to come up with a categorization of what's out there, then share that, but also trying to provide a new way of thinking about the types of methods that are out there. And there's, of course, no shortage of challenges as it relates to anticipation. It is fair to say is that, of course, all the challenges that are related with data, and especially the use of non-traditional data, exist in that space as well. But given the fact that it's also about anticipation, one also needs to, of course, be careful about preventing kind of self-fulfilling prophecies by using those anticipatory methods as well. Again, not going into detail what those challenges might be, but what we try to do as well, which anyway tries to be more kind of applied, is to also give a set of criteria that you can use to then decide what method might be fit for purpose, what method might be more aligned with what you try to do. And here we give a set of criteria that can allow you to decide which method and what innovation might be for you in the space might be more appropriate. And here we're looking into both kind of the nature of migration, because different types of migration might require different types of methodologies. Also the level of the maturity of the method, because suffice to say is that a lot of those new methods still are being tested out. And so we also need to understand, has this been actually applied and has this been tested? But also, of course, anyway, time frame of anticipations. Clearly, if you want to anticipate kind of early warnings, it's a different kind of method that is needed than if you want to do a 50-year kind of prediction. And also, of course, availability of data and other elements are kind of the elements that we are focusing on. In the paper, we also describe certain future directions. And again, the big element that we want to explore and advocate for is really the sweet spot between, on the one hand, forecast and foresight, and how do we actually start not thinking in those kinds of categories of qualitative versus quantitative, but actually combine them in order to have better anticipation and better understanding of what might happen, but also the opportunity to merge and to blend traditional data with non-traditional data is another area that, from our perspective, really provides for innovation in the space and can make anticipation better, and also far more responsive to what happens in the field. So I'm going to stop here and give the floor to the next speaker, which I think is Matteo.
Yeah, I don't understand why my slide are not shown, but it's okay. No worries. My role here is to give you, or what I wanted to do in this section of the webinar that is dedicated to methodologies and methodological advancements, is just to give you some pointers to some of the articles of the special collection, and give you again my vision as one of the reviewers and one of the editors of the special collection. So I have broadly categorized the articles into methodological innovations and methodological topics and methodological advancements, and instead articles that are more on the data side of things, that scan and explore the role of novel data sources in predicting migration and in working in migration management, in migration forecasting. So in terms of methodological innovations, there are 3 papers, namely Casagran et al., Bosco et al., and Kieron and Madsen, that are really focused on machine learning methodologies. I like to call them machine learning for action, in the sense that in all 3 cases, we see advanced machine learning methodologies, so artificial neural networks, random forests, and in some cases also innovative data sources. So I'm thinking mainly about Bosco and co-authors. We will have Umberto talking about it at the end of the seminar, at the end of the let's call it a seminar, which really use advanced machine learning methodologies, and in some cases really show how these methodologies are useful, for example, for aid agencies. So Kieron and Madsen are from DRC. Casagran is in general providing a tool for aid and non-governmental organizations in that space. And I think it's a quite interesting vision of the use of machine learning methodologies for operational purposes. So you are on the field, you want to know how many people are coming, and these are the tools that you want to use. On the other side, more traditional econometrics is applied or has been shown by Barker and Bijak, who use VARs and so vector autoregression, a cornerstone of econometric research, specifically mixed frequency VARs, for predicting midterm migration. So we are moving forward with respect to a purely operational setting. So for forecasts with a short time frame, we are moving into years, and we want to try to understand what is going to happen in 2 to 5 years. And one of the main take-home messages, of the paper, and the thing that is going to be, or one of the things that I'm going to stress in the conclusions, is really the issue of uncertainty. So migration, of course, if you work in the space, you know it probably better than me, but migration is a deeply uncertain phenomenon, and being able to cope with uncertainty, as Barker and Bijak do, is actually a key part. To go forward, so to forecast on longer time horizons, what you need to do is to move to hybrid methods. And this is Martin et al. And Udovic and Dominic. And mainly I will focus more on Martin, who used and combined qualitative or quanti-qualitative scenarios, namely the SSPs that are very well known, let's say, to the people in the audience more aware of climate change research, to then trigger discussions among stakeholders in order to understand what is going to happen what is going to happen in terms of migration patterns. Moving forward, the second big, let's say the second big group of papers. Next slide, please. Is papers focused on innovative data, the so-called data revolution. AW and co-authors give a very well crafted, let's say, analysis of the use of mobile data, so data coming from a mobile network of operators, and how and why they are useful, and how and why they may be risky for ethics purposes. So you may be discriminatory in the use of this kind of data, and let's say this idea for these questions are really expanded and analyzed very deeply in the paper. At the same time, you may wonder, or you may start to wonder, if innovative data sources, so mobile network operator data, or Google search data, and so on and so forth, actually add information to, for instance, official statistics. It is the classical way of doing this kind of things. And Tuba-Birkan analyzes this question very deeply and proposes an idea of augmentation. So the innovative data should augment official statistics. And let's say in terms of the correspondence between the availability of innovative data and, for example, the presence of a correspondence between theory and, let's say, what you can say with this innovative data, a very relevant paper is Runke and Rischke, where they try to model not migration flows, but migration intentions. And one of the main conclusions is that there is a difference, or some of the theoretical models that you build to explain migration behavior cannot be seen in data, or at least cannot be seen with the current data, which poses a question of, is it our model, let's say, too refined to actually be seen, or is it a problem of data sources that are not able to capture what I'm actually trying to capture with theoretical models? This is the end of my section. I will leave the floor to Damien for a more deep analysis of foresight approaches and scenario methodologies.
Thanks, Matteo, and good day, everyone. Good to be here. I'll be brief. I just want to highlight some of the work that has been done on foresight in this collection, and start potentially with kind of a brief situationing of where we stand on foresight. Foresight, of course, some of you better than I do, but it's really this systematic examination of potential risks and trends and shifts, and particularly for migration, it's quite an important tool now, especially within the UN, but I think more particularly now in IOM, to help us identify a bit these emerging signals and to help deal with this uncertainty that Matteo mentioned is really high in the migration context. In migration policy, it's really intended to help us anticipate drivers and changes in drivers. You can think of climate, you can think of conflict, you can think of demographics, technological disruptions, and it's really intended to kind of help policymakers stress test some of the strategies against the scenarios that we can really develop in the foresight realm. Within the UN, I was saying there's a slow but steady increasing recognition of foresight as a key element. It's recognized within this UN 2.0 quintet of change. This is also the case in IOM, where we start really building and structuring a little bit more what we do around foresight. And obviously, I think this is also where partnerships are really important. And so here, yeah, emphasizing that we work very closely, for instance, with GRC to do a bit of this horizon scanning in common. And I think together, this usually diversity of partnerships is really what brings a lot of the interesting viewpoints on migration. So yeah, I think on Foresight, this special collection here is really trying to reinforce the fact that Foresight is kind of this bridge quite often between data, evidence, and policy. So really, I think it's quite critical for us even within the UN to embrace it a lot more. Yeah, to find that kind of way of liaising the data and then the policy making. So just to finish on the Foresight, I really wanted to recognize the contribution of some of you. I see Vanya, I think, in the call, but others as well on Foresight. The articles that you published on the collections are quite interesting. They have quite a few common threads. Sorry, on the Foresight angle. First of all, of course, always on each of these articles, recognizing this uncertainty of context of migration and this need to shift from reactive to anticipatory governance. Another common thread is also that each of these Foresight elements here is really participatory. It's really inclusive. It's looking at multiple type of stakeholder engagement, engaging local communities, displaced population or migrant population, policymakers, and so on to co-create the scenarios that you have in there. And then it's a little bit what Matteo also emphasized at the end. It's this integration of quali and quanti methods that also is making it very interesting, combining data-driven forecast in some of those with the more narrative-based sense-making type of exercise to create scenarios. So yes, kudos to all of this. It was very interesting in terms of reading, and I'm looking forward to further explore some of these use cases and use them on our side as well, actually. That's all. I'll give the floor back to Anya.
Thank you, Damien. If you could stop sharing, I will share my screen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because in the interest of time, I am going to skip a lot of slides and just share with you maybe links in the chat so you can explore them later. So I just wanted to say that at the Joint Research Center, we are engaged in multiple exercises that have to do with anticipation in many different ways. A big shout out to the Disaster Risk Management Knowledge Center. I will share the link in the chat. They are doing a lot of really cutting edge work. And I just included a screenshot from the Inform Climate Change dashboard that is including projections and like forecasting of potential crisis in the future when it comes to climate, but also conflicts. So something that is really, really very, very interesting from the humanitarian perspective. We also had, like, we are doing so much on like anticipation in terms of early warning that there was a JRC-wide midterm early warning review of methodology. I will share the report in the chat. We contributed to it as a demography and migration unit. And as a unit, we also contribute both to the existing situation awareness and anticipatory circuits such as Migration Preparedness and Crisis Blueprint Network, but also to the implementation of the research side of the Pact on Migration. And Umberto will actually tell us more about the scientific base for our contribution. In the interest of time, I would just give it away to Umberto. So if you can go to the slide that is about his contribution. So I invite Umberto. Then I think we have Bo Madsen as another author, and if other folks want to also contribute, please, that's definitely possible. Umberto.
Thank you, Anya, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for having me today. And I'm glad I can quickly present our contribution to this special collection. In this one slide that covers most, let's say, aspects of the paper. Of course, you can read more about the details in the paper itself. We try to address the challenges of anticipating future migratory trends, which is crucial for the development of effective policies to manage the associated challenges and opportunities. So the problem is that migration is a complex system with multifaceted drivers, and this makes it very tough to predict. So we use the publicly available data sources from sources such as Frontex, Eurostat, and we apply the rigorous variable selection process to identify the most relevant drivers of migration, including economic and environmental factors. Selecting a subset of these available variables is key, as it reduces the number of issues that can occur when working with poor data conditions, as we are doing. So the core insight of our paper is that by using different machine learning techniques and combining them through an ensemble model, we can produce relatively accurate forecasts of migration flows up to 6 months ahead in the future. And our results show that the explained variance of our model is as high as 80%, indicating a strong predictive capacity of the model. So this improves the anticipatory migration governance by providing policymakers with a robust tool to prepare for future migration flows, allowing for more effective allocation of resources and addressing potential challenges in advance. This year, in particular, we have been working on improving the predictive capacity of our model, going beyond the training data by including inputs from human experts. This overcomes the limitation of a poorly data-driven approach, which relies only on the information found in selected covariates that can never cover all aspects of a complex phenomenon such as migration. We use this new mixed model to support the implementation of the Pact of Migration and Asylum Management. And if you want to know more about this new approach, I invite you to stay tuned on the most recent research outputs published by our team. Meanwhile, I thank you for giving me the chance to present our paper, and I hope you found it useful and interesting, and I thank you. Next speaker, please.
Okay, so if that's not the case, let's maybe go to the Q&As and...
I think, Anna, the Q&As are at the moment all almost answered. There's one, I think, how can we improve the reliability of migration forecasting models while communicating their uncertainty, which I think is a key element here, of course, which was mentioned by, I think, everyone here, is that, anyway, to a large extent, you can only anticipate with a certain level of certainty, because the future happens to be volatile. And so, Damien, Matteo, Anna, you want to address that?
Matteo, definitely.
No, it's an interesting question. Again, it would be interesting also, Anna and Damien, because if you work with policymakers, like within the UN, of course, and within the European context, how do you communicate uncertainty of the forecast or the foresight, right? And obviously it's a communications issue, but also kind of a cultural issue on how willing are policymakers to know it's not that certain, for instance, right? Because we saw that also in other areas that, anyway, policymakers have a hard time dealing with uncertainty, for instance.
I can start. I think one of the one of the things we say in the Foresight realm all the time is that Foresight is really not about predicting the future. It's about developing multiple plausible scenarios to help prepare for each of those. So to me, I think coming from potentially a less data angle, it's more about thinking about what possible futures may bring. And having looked into forecasts, like data forecasts, especially looking into irregular arrival of movements towards Europe for a while now, but also looking into more broadly like forecasting of displacement, for example. I think there is still it's still fairly difficult to be able to say exactly beyond the kind of like fairly usual trends when shocks may be. And so as long as we can't really do this forecast around shocks, I think it's still important to be able to have both data models and foresight, more qualitative, that can potentially be there to add a bit more about what the data does not really tell us about different drivers of migration. So yeah, I think that's why it's important to have that mixed method. And so yes, I think especially when it comes to looking into irregular arrival of movements, yeah, the forecasting needs to be we need to clearly indicate, and this is what I think the colleagues here, I see Konstantinos from EUA, GRC, they do when they have their own forecast of movements towards the EU. They are careful in saying that this is not only about the figure, it's about how it looks like, the trends, and so on and so on. So of course, I think communication around this is extremely sensitive and needs to be very carefully thought.
Yeah, to complement maybe on a bit of what you said, I mean, of course, it is surely a communication issue, and I would also add a training issue in the sense that in many cases we're talking about, or I'm thinking about when you do, I don't know, distributional forecasting. So instead of returning a single number, you need to return either an interval or, in the most advanced cases, a distribution of values that is telling you, okay, my number of migrants is going to be here, and this is the shape of this distribution. In some cases, it's hard to convey this kind of notions to someone who doesn't have, for example, a quantitative background or a probabilistic background, because you also find these kind of problems with, I don't know, engineers who are not super quantitative, but do not have the stochastic mindset, if you pass me the expression. At the same time, I think it's a call for opening up the community and opening up the anticipatory or the anticipation in migration community to experiences coming from other fields. I mean, the idea of dealing with uncertainty, with uncertain predictions, and convincing, I don't know, stakeholders and practitioners that of the value, for example, of a quantitative prediction or of a mixed prediction, is a problem that is super present in, I don't know, supply chain management or economics and econometrics and so on and so forth. So, for example, I was extremely happy to see the work of Jakub featured in our collection, because I think he was really able to build a bridge between classically econometric methodologies coming from economic policy and monetary policy, and a field where these kind of techniques are not super represented. So in a cross-fertilization between forecasters of stuff, or a cross-fertilization between forecasters, I think it's another way to go. Yeah, I see.
Stefan, this is yours now.
No, well, meaning I was looking at you guys, but again, thanks, Albert, for the question. And of course, this is a whole different, it's almost like a special issue that we should organize around the use of AI in the context of migration research. But I think, anyway, as what we see here is that ultimately the ideal is kind of a hybrid approach where you do use AI, but then you also have a human input and human oversight to a large extent. And I think that's the area that is of course the most contentious, is to what extent is AI being used for automated decision making and automated triage, for instance, of the options that might exist as it relates to the response. And I think that's an area that obviously needs to be considered with a heightened level of sensitivity and also a level of kind of risk, right? And so this is kind of where, of course, the AI Act in terms of risk profile, I think the risk profile of using AI for automated decision making as it relates to, for instance, who can come in and who cannot come in at the level of the border might be kind of an area that obviously needs to be treated differently than using AI for anticipation, where obviously it still needs to be made sense of, and you still need to translate that into what does that mean in terms of decision making, where human oversight and human decision intelligence comes in. But again, others might have a view on that, and you might have a view, Albert, on that as well that you can share. I'm sure you have.
I think on Foresight particularly,
Yeah.
AI is used a lot to develop the scenarios, to run the horizon scanning, to categorize signals and so on. But I've also seen like it pushed at an extreme. I think we tried also to use it in kind of a live sense making exercise with people in a room discussing horizon scanning and scenarios. And we advised them use AI to kind of like create your scenarios. We ended up, I think, losing them completely because they were all on their laptop developing their own scenarios, depending on the AI, depending on how well it was previously trained, depending on the prompts, it gave very different things. So I think a lesson learned on our side is that specifically for migration foresight exercises, we will reduce it a bit. We can use it before to generate some of the scenarios because I think that's quite good. Within the sense-making exercise, I would limit as much as possible the use.
Great. And I'm sensitive to the time because we have like 1 minute left. I think it remains, and I think we have another question from Patrick, which of course is related to views and views forecasting. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm not sure, we should definitely include it in our tools. By the way, the repository is something that is a living document. So feel free to share based upon what you heard today and based upon what you've seen. Feel free to share any tools that we might have forgotten or might not have included so that we can update that. But also, if you are interested in contributing to data and policy, your work and your research, we are still very open. I mean, we already have received questions from authors on whether they can still contribute to the collection, and I think that's still an option as well. But with that, I leave it to Matteo and Anna, perhaps for some final reflections as well.
We have one final question. Maybe we managed to answer it. How can migration forecasting, how can migration forecasting models be improved to better anticipate crisis-driven flows, such as the Rohingya movement into Bangladesh, and which data sources are most useful for real-time prediction in these situations?
This is a one-day workshop in itself.
Yeah, I would say a 1 week workshop.
No, but there's the GRC is working on this informed warning tool, which I think is going to be very interesting. Views indeed on conflict forecasting. I think there is quite a lot of different initiatives that could help looking into that. But yeah.
right?
I just wanted to mention that currently at the Joint Research Center, we are looking into the available data for, in particular, for the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh. And one data source that is absolutely instrumental in at least following the developments is the satellite data. It's a very useful source of data in this case. And I will try to find the workshop that Damien mentioned to share it in the chat if we manage. Matteo, would you want to maybe wrap up quickly?
Yeah, I mean, shall I share the slides or?
I think we're running out of time, Matteo, because
Okay,
people
yeah,
talking
so I
more.
can just that's perfect. So, I mean, as take-home messages from this section, what I would like to communicate is how methodological pluralism is a very important thing. I mean, we went through different types of methodologies, and Damien stressed, for example, very much the importance of having multiple methodologies at play, especially when predicting multiple scales of migration phenomena, both from a spatial perspective as well from of a temporal perspective, and something that was touched upon in the questions. We are not unaware of the ethical and governance imperatives of the use of AI. So the use of AI has very serious consequences in terms of bias or in terms of representativeness of the data that is used and of the models that are being used, as well as surveillance concerns in terms of malicious actors or malicious governments that may use the information that are being produced in a negative way. That is why it's fundamental to have some kind of regulation or a regulation framework. And in this context, the EU AI Act that classifying migration-related AI systems as a high risk is, I think it's a step ahead. So I think this concludes the webinar, and it has been a pleasure for me, and I'm sure for all the speakers to be here. This is also let's say a call to stay in touch and to create a community of practice of scientists and policymakers and practitioners active in this space. So of course the special issue or the special collection is actually an ongoing document. Data for Policy is always super interested in receiving this kind of contributions. So let's make this webinar let's say the first of maybe not many series, but in any case a point where or the first point of a situation where we can stay in touch. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.